everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's council meeting. I'll start with the acknowledgement. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that Jasper, that the municipality of Jasper is on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as the Jasper House Métis district. This land is traditional territory, meeting grounds, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Daneza, the Siniwachi Una, Siniwachi Nia, the Siniwachi, Suinkik, Stony Nakota, Mountain Métis, and Métis. The municipality of Jasper acknowledges the lands, strong the relationship Indigenous people have with this land, remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place, to Indigenous people, and to reaffirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonization and continue to affect our Indigenous people today. I call the meeting to order at 1:31. Is there any additions to the agenda? Councillor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller. I would like to add, if I could please, agenda item 6.5 on update around the arena, please.
Thank you. Any other additions?
To another closed session item, economic.
Legal or?
No, one of the things that you can discuss is economic or other interests.
Okay. Councillor, make a motion to add these to the agenda. Councillor Hall, all those in favor? Councillor, that will approve today's agenda with the additions. Councillor Hall, all those in favor? Today we have two sets of minutes, the regular meeting minutes of November 5th that were circulated. Is there any errors or omissions? Well, can I have a councillor? Councillor Waxer, all those in favor? That is carried. And we also have 3.2, committee of the whole meeting minutes of November 12th. Again, they were all circulated in your package. Any errors or omissions? Councillor that will approve those minutes. Councillor Waxer, all those in favor? Is there any business arising from either minutes? Okay. Under delegations, is there anybody within our gallery that would like to address anything on today's agenda? No takers? Okay. Move on, correspondence, I didn't see any in the package. Mr. Gibbon, have we any correspondence? Okay, thank you. New business, Jasper Recovery Coordination Center progress update.
Okay, Mayor Keller, you will see that the JRCC update is included in the council package. I don't see Director Fark on our attendee or panelist list, so he may be otherwise committed. I know that the weekly turnaround for these updates maybe doesn't always necessitate a verbal presentation. Certainly, if there are any questions that council had for clarification, we can take those back to Director Fark and respond back with an answer. But you can see some of the projects that have been undertaken by the JRCC, particularly with respect to some areas of interest for council, maybe around temporary accommodations and demolition and debris removal. So there's a number of items of interest to council and community in the report. But again, happy to take back any questions that council might have to come back with an answer for you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Is there any questions? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Temporary accommodations are extended until the end of February. That's a new, I think that's new information, which is amazing. My other question is around the position of the business liaison. Has that been filled or where are we at with that one?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP for Councillor Hall. So we haven't yet filled the position. We just closed it last week. I think Thursday of last week, the posting closed. Received a number of qualified applicants, and I'm going to be interviewing those positions on Thursday this week.
Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. I just have a question for clarity on page 20. We have the demolition and debris removal. And we're preparing to request leaseholders to either assign a prime contractor or take control of their own work site. What that indicates to me that the goal, I believe, was to be finished with demolition by the end of April. If I recall, maybe at the end of May. Is this to get people to commit that they have chosen a contractor or that they are going to take care of the demolition on their own? I just want to be clear in what this point is indicating.
Deputy Mayor.
Mayor Keller, I can see that Director Park is online now, and so he would answer that, but I know there's a couple of layers. And it also is a measure to mitigate the municipality's liability. We're currently the prime contractor on all sites that are behind the construction fence in the residential areas. And so that obviously exposes the municipality to some risk. In a typical situation, a property owner, leaseholder, would be responsible for, their property. But under this situation, Alberta OHS has assigned that prime contractor responsibility to the municipality. In terms of managing our risk, we need to ensure that it's assigned to an appropriate party. So that's at least one layer, and Director Fark may be able to discuss the other layers in terms of how it interfaces with the intent to advance the debris removal. Director Fark.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Deputy Mayor and Council. So as AO Given had indicated, that the primary intent is to ensure that the leaseholder is properly assigned as prime contractor, and either directly themselves or through their chosen contractor, and that is in order to, again, limit the municipality's exposure to liability, as we are currently the prime contractor. We are also optimistic that this will help to incentivize those who have not already done so to make a decision in terms of how they wish to move forward on the debris removal process. Because as council, I imagine, can appreciate, we cannot have sites undemolished or unclean for an extended period of time. So at some point, the majority of people will make a decision and they will move forward. But at some point, we will have some of those who are, for whatever reasons, not moving forward on their demolition. And we need a process and a deadline to incentivize them to do that in order to ensure that all sites are appropriately cleaned up.
First off, I'd just like to acknowledge the activity happening in the community over the last week now. It's inspiring. I think throughout the community, everybody's feeling like we are moving forward now. So it's great to see some fairly large scale cleanup going on in the residential areas. So thank you to JRCC for everything you've done to facilitate that. My question is more to, I guess, council, and it's not to Director Fark, but I brought it up last week about hopefully Director Saunders facilitating a local contractor information session / strategic workshop for the rebuild, and would hope to just get support of council to ask the administration to just follow up with that. Mr. Given, with Director Saunders.
Deputy Mayor Keller, for Councillor Wilson, certainly administration had to take that back and discuss, and maybe a little bit more discussion about what sort of council would see as the scope of that. Certainly that's something we either follow up if you want to provide additional sort of detail to the concept by email, we can do that. if it's something that might be more labor intensive or resource, intensive, then maybe direction, from council to administration would be useful. But if it is just sort of, here's a concept of what we would like to do, or thought of something that might be useful, feel free to suggest that. I can certainly discuss it with Dr. Saunders, see where it may fit. That might be a starting point, and then if we identify that it's gonna be something that's, like say that larger scale, that might be more resource or time intensive, then we might need to come back to council. But if it's a easy enough can do, and it's a suggestion, we're happy to act on that. If it's something that's larger, then maybe we need a little bit more council direction to identify that it's a priority over other work that may be ongoing in the department already.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm just following up with, a suggestion from Director Saunders that this was already in the works, so maybe it's a discussion with her first. And maybe confirmation that this might be happening. I wouldn't want to put parameters around it. It's something that she might already be working on. So I guess, could we leave it with you to have that conversation, and if it needs further direction, then it comes back to council?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda, then Councillor Hall.
Thank you. I did have something to address directly with the report, but to support Councillor Wilson, just for clarification, it's about the opportunity of maximizing our local resources and expertise in the community when it comes to the rebuild. Is that the direction? Okay, that's good. I'll support that any day.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have a question for Councillor Wilson. Have the local contractors, are they getting together to kind of unite and I know there's a few, I know you're one, I'm just curious, if there's been some movement just on that, on contractor end.
Definitely contractors talking about how best to participate in the rebuild, but I think a joint conversation facilitated by the municipality might be a little bit more effective.
Councillor Wexler.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Director Fark. I was reviewing my notes from previous meetings and came across the term rebuilding navigators. And I wondered if that was something that the Recovery Center has considered, and if so, if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
So my apologies, my internet is a little bit unstable here in the new office of the JRCC. So you did cut out for just a moment there, Councillor, but I believe that question is actually best directed to Director Saunders, as it is intended to be a process to help the public navigate the sort of redevelopment and permitting process.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Hall.
Sorry, one more question. Just around the drop-in sessions that the Parks Administration building is hosting, is that every week those times, or was it a 1 week shot? I'm just seeing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm just getting a lot of, residents have a lot of questions and confusion around this process because I don't think it's anything we thought we'd be doing. But I'm, just curious if that is an ongoing thing every week.
Sorry, I apologize. Again, my internet cut out and I did not manage to catch the first part of your question.
I'm curious if the drop-in sessions at Parks Canada office around rebuilding are ongoing every week, or was it just 1 week?
No, they are ongoing, and yes, they are ongoing.
Councillor Demoda.
I was gonna try something funny like that. Mess you up too much. I apologize. Can you hear me okay? Director Park, okay. I just wanted to thank you for listening to council and more so from concerns with the community, and I see them addressed in the update. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. On behalf of the people that were asking me questions last week. I just wanted to follow up on the interim housing. There was a roundtable held on the 14th, and please excuse me if I'm causing repetition here again. I just wanted to see where we're at with the RFPs that were supposed to come out of that. And do we have any indication from the government if things are looking positive and moving forward?
So we are in ongoing discussions with our partners in the GOA around the interim housing. The first RFP has closed. The review process is now more or less complete. We are expecting the GOA to announce their award within the next couple of days. So that will be for the phase 1 of the procurement. And then pending the outcome of that, we will look at whether or not to move forward with a phase 2 higher density RFP. But at this point in time, until they make the announcement, we are unable to determine definitively whether or not we will need to do the second round of procurement.
Questions to your report? Thank you, and thank you to your team, Mr. Park, for all the updates and for all the work on moving everything forward within our community.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to 6.2, Director's Report, Finance and Administration, and I believe that would be Mrs. Melnichuk.
Receive confirmation.
Oh, sorry. And a motion, Councillor Demoda, that we receive Mr. Park's report for information. All those in favor? That is carried. Apologies for that. It's fine too. I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Melnichuk.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'll just go over the report on a high level. Basically, first off, you'll see some information about IT, and a lot of it has to do about the support that was given during the response and recovery of the wildfire. So there was a lot of work to move all of our systems to remote locations so that all of our administration could continue work, and kudos to all of those involved. I must say at the end, at the IT section, there is a mention about Trinas. They did give us their top techs during this time. They were available 24/7 to assist our IT coordinator to ensure that we were set up. So all in all, I think overall we were quite well supported in this event. So we're very thankful for that. After the move to the remote location, obviously we had to move back to Jasper as well. So that was all set up before we were even able to come back to our offices. So again, just really great service to enable us all to continue our work. In the aftermath and the recovery, we have also posted an IT technician position, and that has been filled and should start within 2 weeks. So then IT will have additional support to support the recovery as well. Obviously, that was also needed during the entire emergency event, but we did not have that, and but it was very well taken care of considering the amount of people that we had working on the situation. So other than that, we're looking at year end is coming up already, and we're already looking at an interim year-end audit will be scheduled for the 3 days after budget presentations that are scheduled for next week. So next week will be very, very busy for administration. So we have the 2 days for budget. We're presenting on the 26th and 27th, and then we move in from the 27th, 28th, and 29th, sorry, that's a typo, for the interim year-end audit. And then the final year is scheduled for March 24th to 28th of 2025 to ensure that we have everything ready for the province by May 1st. The day after evacuation, actually, we got announcement of the Canada Community Building Fund allotment for Jasper, and that amount was $326,002. And also of note is that the initial disaster recovery funding deposit was received to assist our cash flow during the aftermath of the event. So we have that in our bank to assist our cash flow with the additional expenses. With staffing, so unfortunately, in our administration office, 5 of my staff, including myself, have been moved to houses or housed by temporary accommodation. So more than half of the staff from the administration office. So that's been interesting and challenging, but they have, they're very resilient and are amazing and very strong and working hard to assist in the recovery of Jasper. And I can't say enough about my staff. They've been working so hard and I really appreciate everything that they do. They truly care. We did hire also a JRCC finance coordinator, which I'm super excited about. So that came into play on November 4th, and she is still learning. And we're working together on, she will be taking care of the disaster recovery fund, mostly in reporting and keeping things on track and whatnot. So she started in on that, and I'll give a bit more information on that as we go through the reports, but you'll see more and more come together as now, since now we have the additional staffing to assist in that area. It's been very hard to keep up the normal tasks of the positions that we have, just because of the side of the desk job or it ended up being our full-time job over the past few months. So we're now just starting to get back to our normal workloads, thanks to the assistance from this position. As you can see, there was 6, and you've probably seen it around town, there's 60 new business licenses since the last report that I gave for month end of May 31st. So this is mostly due to new businesses in town to assist with recovery. Monthly tax payments for non-destroyed properties resumed on September 1st. And utilities for July and August were sent out to all properties. And just to note for any that haven't read or heard that any credits going forward, if applicable, will be determined once we know more about our financial stabilization position, or the assistance that we might be receiving. So we should have more details coming shortly about this. And the September-October meter reads for utilities have been completed. So those were supposed to be mailed out right away, but obviously with the postal strike, this will hinder that process for those that still receive paper copies and not electronic version. To note was that within the assessments, we had 14 assessment appeals. However, all of them were resolved before going to hearing, so none will go to hearing. I already noted about the presentations for the budget upcoming next week. And just another highlight that communication is still ongoing with governing bodies on potential relief for residents and commercials that sustained damage or complete loss due to the wildfires. So we appreciate all of those that are giving us time to figure things out. It will take us a while before we'll be able to have everything established and clear to give further communication, but we've been trying our best to expedite as much as possible. Leading on to the next page is an overview of all the departments within the municipality, and you'll see that obviously at the end of the line there is a deficit at this point. However, I would like to mention that 6.8 million of expenses have been so far put onto the books for the disaster. So there are some recoveries that will occur within that 8.8 million, so that is not obviously will not be the final deficit number. The DRP allocations have not been established for the year, so that will change things. There'll be a lot of changes by the time you see the next report come to council on where we are for the summary. We would not be seeing any deficit at this point if it weren't for that expense, that additional expense, so. Otherwise, in the council's report, bang on for 75% of the year, so still on par with council expenditures, still completely on target with council. And then there is also the very lengthy capital report, so you can see where the expenses are to date. Obviously, some of these projects will be work in progress and be coming back to council for carrying forward into the next year, into 2025. Those discussions don't usually happen until the new year, once we know, once all the invoices come in for the 2024 year. But we'll see some that will be ongoing, as well as some that might also be reassessed on whether or not we'll be bringing them forward for the 2025 year with the new capital projects that will be listed in the budgets that's being presented next week. So you'll see some recommendations coming from that administration about the capital budget as you see it, as well as what's being presented for the next few years as well. And that's everything for now, and I'm open to any questions that you might have about the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Valenchuk, and I'd like to thank you and your staff and Mr. Campbell for all the work that you've done over the last few months. I was in signing checks yesterday, and I have to say you have a very happy staff. It's a delight to go in there and all working so hard and getting everything up to date, and it's credit to you and your department. I just want to pass along the congratulations to all your staff. Any questions from council? Councillor Demore.
Well, I wanted to echo that as well, just being the person that was going and signing checks prior to Deputy Mayor Keller MP. It was a treat, and I felt better coming out of there than when I went in. So that's a testament to, you know, the good vibes that are going on, considering everything that everybody has to go through. So I appreciate that.
Councillor Wilson.
It may be that you, Director Valenchuk or Mr. Given, but have we had any response from the GOA regarding our request for financial stabilization assistance?
Go ahead.
Deputy Mayor Keller MP for Councillor Wilson. So no, not at this time. We haven't had an official response. Council will remember that you passed a formal motion to request multiple years of financial stabilization. Particularly the 2024 year, which was intended to be able to provide some financial relief to owners of destroyed properties on a number of different measures, utility rates, as Director Valenchuk mentioned, but also property taxes that may have been prepaid. We haven't, as I said, heard a formal response to that yet. We're hopeful that we'll get that soon, but of course we are closing into the end of the year. It has caused some difficulty for administration with respect to the preparation of the 2025 budget. Not to mention the concern from residents who are waiting to understand what that situation will be, for them financially. So we continue to be in conversation with GOA on this, so we hope to get a response soon. I think one thing that's important for the community to know about why the municipality can't act on 2024 financial stabilization is just about our, the scale of this disaster, the scale of the costs associated with it, and the municipality's financial position. We are and have been prior to the fire in a good financial position, but we're not a large municipality with large revenues. And I think some useful context is other municipalities in the region that have faced, wildfire disasters recently who might have made DRP submissions. Yellowhead County, obviously, we are all well aware of that, and Edson, other communities in the area. The municipalities, council knows, has a requirement to pay 10% towards any DRP approved costs. In our case, at this stage, I think our, current DRP application is somewhere in the area of $74 million. And let's, for argument's sake, say that it is up higher, but, somewhere around there. Our contribution would be, 7.4 million or 10 million if it was a $100 million application. Our cash reserves from all sources, so all of our cash reserves are $3.4 million at the end of 2023. So, our 10% would require more money than we have at the bank. In contrast, Yellowhead County has $108 million in reserves. So no doubt that the event for Yellowhead County was impactful and a disaster worthy of support, but their ability to provide support to their residents and make their municipal contribution is vastly different than Jasper's. Municipalities that previously faced a similar scale of disaster, like High River, Slave Lake, or Wood Buffalo, all of those events happened prior to the recent change to require that 10% contribution from the municipality. So we certainly ask our residents to bear with us while we work through this with government. We're hopeful that, and the GOA has certainly been supportive up to this point of many different measures. We hope that we'll see that same support, but council and the public need to understand that our fiscal capacity to manage such a large scale disaster is very, very constrained. And we just can't act maybe as quickly as we'd like to on those financial relief measures unless we get that confirmation from the provincial government. It does add some uncertainty to our budgeting for 2025. Director Malinchuk's looked at that, and you can expect to see in the budget presentations next week what the potential costs of starting to put away money, since we don't have enough money in the bank to be able to make our 10% contribution, what the potential tax implications would be of starting to put money away now for that future expense that we can see coming. So more to come on that, but just to provide a little bit of background information again for our community, so they're aware of the challenges the municipality faces in being able to respond to their needs.
Councillor Demona.
Thank you very much, and I think that was a very good description of the situation that we're in. And just to follow up on that, just for public knowledge in itself, the reason why that 10% obligations come in is due to other communities in the province that weren't doing their due diligence in either prevention or future prevention after they've had disasters. So that was put in place, as we were told, because there were communities that weren't taking the steps to help better themselves in their situations. And since they've been doing that, we've also been told that the mitigation for disasters has been taking place in those kind of communities that have caused the province to go in this direction. And I'm hoping that with the amount of work that we've done with our fire safe initiatives and protecting the community and the future work that we're going to be doing in and around the community will prove to the province that, that they should be looking at this at a one-on-one basis as it comes along, because I think that there are communities that work really hard and we shouldn't be punished for other communities that weren't doing their due diligence, as I was saying. So that just adds a little bit more behind what our CAO was describing. Thank you.
To Mr. Given, to Director Malinchuk, the 6.2 million that we're down in the budget right now, and that's kind of for all the hotel payments and everything that we're making on behalf of the JRCC. That money is guaranteed back from the government, right? Because we wouldn't be looking at the tax relief or the utility relief yet.
Thank you for the question. So it was 6.8 million, and within the context of that, yes, it would include the hotels, or the infrastructure protection, staffing, contracting services, whatnot. So any materials, goods, supplies needed. So within the context of all of that, that is would be regarded under the DRP as 90% recoverable and 10% that the municipality would be burdened with. So obviously we're already nearing that, we're already nearing some big numbers for the municipality itself, and for us to consider that big already is, yeah, daunting for sure, but so within all contexts, it's all within that 90 and 10 split.
Thank you for that. And the utility bills that are now, some people going to be late, will we be charging interest on that, or will we be waiving that?
Thank you for that question as well. No, anything that would be sent out late would not incur penalties. That is not the fault of the client. That is definitely on other bodies, but we would not be charging any kind of penalties for that. We will send out as many as we can through our email system, but any that are not able to receive them, we would not penalize them.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Director Mojek? No, do I have Councillor willing to make a motion to accept the report for information? Thank you, Councillor Wexler. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Mojek, and thank you again to your staff. Councillor Demoda.
I did have one question. Director Malachek stated that we were on track for our expenses, and I just, for Councillor stuff, it looked to me like there was, other than me, a few of us that were still behind in reporting. So I just wanted to encourage people that don't have their stuff to get their submissions in, including myself. So and I just wanted to admit that publicly, that I'm a little bit behind. And you know, like, still with a month and a half left, there's $100 or so thousand that, you know, have been budgeted for this year. So just wanted to make sure that we're not skewing the numbers off too much. That's a pretty big number. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda. Grant funding, the emergency watershed storage facility. This was on this last week at committee of the whole. I'm going to hand it over to Mr.
Sure, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller. I don't know that administration is in a position to present. It was presented at committee last week. As council knows, we're seeking council's formal approval to submit a grant application under the provincial water wastewater program. Acting Director Nance is here to answer any questions that you might have from the technical side about the project. But again, this is a recommendation from committee that council provide a formal motion so we can submit that application before the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Maybe you could just give us a brief overview again. I know it was in the committee of the whole, we had a bit of a history there, but just for the viewing public, because it isn't attached to the agenda. So I think we're almost obligated to do this work, although there's some grants that we can apply for.
Yes, thanks for the question. Oh, okay, thank you. First time on mic. Thanks for the question. The municipality operates under an approval through Alberta Environment and Parks that covers the wastewater treatment. That approval is a 10-year one, and we received a new one in May of this year. And one of the stipulations in there was that we create emergency wastewater storage in what was a decommissioned lagoon before the current treatment plant was built. Because whenever there's a plant upset or an outage, as occurred during the wildfire, wastewater flows will overflow into what was the old lagoon, and because it's unlined, will seep into the ground and potentially enter the river. And so this requirement relates to reducing that impact on the environment. The estimated cost is just under $5 million. The grant that we're applying for would provide up to about 47% funding based on Jasper's population. So we're making this application now. The approval sets deadlines that we'll seek extensions for, and in hopes that we receive successful grant funding, we plan to undertake the detailed design next year and construction in 2026.
Yeah, further, so would this be something we were planning for, like, the other 53%, would that come out of reserves, and do we have enough reserves, to cover the rest if we're successful with the 47% of the 5 million?
There'd be two sources. One would be reserves that aren't sufficient for the entire amount, and so borrowing would be the other funding source.
Okay.
And for those reserves, Director Montrec, that would come out of our utilities capital, right?
Yes, that's correct. It would, we would either sub the debt to that area, or any reserves taken would be from the utility capital reserve for yes.
Thank you. Yes. Go ahead, Councillor Demona.
Yeah, again, apologize for any repetition. Just trying to check on a couple of things here. Are we gonna see a significant increase to the capital portion of the utility rates this year to help cover this?
Deputy Mayor, Region Councillor Demona, the increase to reserves is the initial planned increase that we've been seeing planning over the implementation since we started to put more away for capital. So it's not anything more than initially was planned, but the debt would definitely be more than initially anticipated. And we would have to, and that has been forecasted into what you'll see coming in the capital budget and the debt plan, yes.
So some of those earlier initiatives with the triple C model has kind of mitigated some of the increase on the other end, is kind of how I'm seeing it. So I'm just saying that our past contributions have, through the model, we're kind of forecasting a little bit to facilitate some of the costs that might come because of this, or things like this.
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Demona, yes, so as we've been putting more aside to reserves with this plan, unfortunately at that point, we also started to incur more expenses that were coming on board with a 20-plus-year-old building. So as we started putting more weight on reserves, we also had a lot more things that we had to address, being that the asset was well, it was over 20 years old. So once we get to a point where all of those capital items are taken care of, then we'll see a better return on what we have in the plan for saving up for the future. Right now, because of that situation, it's not the best outcome, but it will be great once we're not expending what we are right now in reestablishing the wastewater treatment plant to be what it needs to be at this point.
That's good, and I think a lot of us on this side of the table understand that it's just a matter of, re-communicating to the public that, there's a reason behind the method there, and it's to help us get through times like this and help better our situation in the future for the community, so we don't have beginning and end users have to suffer the full consequence of, the overtime capital depreciation. So that's music. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demona, and just on that as well, I think, going forward, for this, we will probably be looking more at debt than reserves, because we're going to see a lot of utility users decrease for 2025, because anybody that don't have a home will not be contributing, so we are going to see a decrease there. So I think we will be looking at this more as a debenture than actually taking money totally from the reserves. Councillor, or, Mr. Goodman?
Deputy Mayor Keller, just to note, the administration also had forecast that revenue loss. That was a part of what we put in our application to Government of Alberta. Recognizing that our utility customers and the way that our rates are structured, there's these payments that are based on your line size and contributions to capital. Council well knows why we set up our system that way. It's exactly for these kind of expenses. But you're right, the loss of so many utility customers means that there'll be a significant reduction in utility revenue. All things being equal, if there wasn't revenue from some other source, then those costs would either have to be delayed, would either have to be shifted to other users, other customers, or projects delayed. And as you can see from the project that's in front of us right now, some of those projects we just don't have the option to delay. It's actually a part of our requirement from the Government of Alberta to have a wastewater treatment plant to do this lagoon project. And so you can see the bind that the municipalities in. You're exactly right. The loss of utility customers means a loss of revenue, and administration is working to try to solve that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just looking at last week's agenda. It looks like we have 1.7 million in reserves towards this. I'm just reading utility capital accumulated surplus of 1.7 at the end of 2023. Is that going to go towards our share, and then it's another 800,000 we'll have to borrow? Is that correct?
Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Hall, which, are you looking at the report from last week? Okay, just one moment, please.
So the total amount of the MOJ funding required would be about $2.5 million. And so anything above what would be available from utility reserve would require borrowing.
I know I asked this last week, but is there any chance that any of this could come out of the recovery disaster program? This is required, we have to do it. We have to borrow money to do it. It just again speaks to that huge infrastructure deficit that this country is facing, and account for the funds that we get from the government around our infrastructure.
Local government fiscal framework.
And again, this speaks to a need to increase that. And not just for us, this is around the province and the country. I think municipalities and cities are facing this, and it's hard, but it is not to the taxpayer.
If everybody's ready, I would make a motion that council approve the submission. Oh, sorry, Jack. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I little late to the parade here, but I do want to ask a question as it relates to transit and the e-bike program and so on, because that's the next agenda item. So we were talking about the zero emission buses being deferred. Is that going to affect the e-bike program as well, and the charging station? Is that all part and parcel of the same item?
Deputy Mayor Keller, and for Councillor Melnick, happy to talk about that. And the item that we're talking about is 6.3, the grant funding submission for the emergency wastewater storage facility. Happy to discuss that and the e-bike, potential e-bike program and capital in item 6.4, which is next up. So the one that's on the table, it would already move on from director's report and the capital update there. Councillor Malik and Councillor Malik, I'm happy to answer that discussion because it is a part of that transit item, which is on our agenda a little bit later on.
All right, thank you. I missed that.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
I would make the motion that council approve the submission of an application for Alberta Water Wastewater Partnership 2025 funding toward an emergency wastewater storage facility upgrade and new monitoring well.
Any debate? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. On to 6.4 transit bus. RFP cancellation. Now, last week we did this in two motions, one for the procurement and then one to direct administration, so I'll leave that up to council for debate.
Deputy Mayor Keller Granby, so the recommendation from the committee was that council cancel the current procurement process for the electric vehicle buses, and separate motion from last week that council direct administration to reissue a new procurement process in mid-2025. Again, we'll go through all the detail of the report from last week. The summary version, I'll see how good I am at summarizing. The summary version was that the municipality's procurement process ran through the course of the summer, through the events of the community evacuation of wildfire, culminating in the close of the RFP and finalization of submissions on the same day as community reinsurance happened. That obviously meant that administration's capacity to be able to do a good investigative process on the submissions was low. And we received a single submission. And so obviously, if we're going to be recommending anything forward to council, we want to ensure that we had a high degree of due diligence that we just didn't have the capacity to do. As reported last week, there's an opportunity for us to partner with the National Association focused on transit, which previously reported to the municipality on sort of our specifics. They're looking at opportunities for joint procurement. So administration at this time is recommending that council approve canceling the 2024 procurement process, and that we proceed with reissuing and renewed procurement process, potentially in partnership with this federal organization for joint procurement in mid-2025. At that time, council will still have the same rights to choose to decline or to vary. Again, administration made this recommendation just in light of the challenges that we had over the course of the summer and relatively limited response that we saw. I'd like to be able to evaluate our technical specifications and see if that was one of the constraints, and to see whether that joint procurement might offer some opportunities to either revise the technical specs or to partner in a larger procurement that might attract more interest. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coon. Open to council for questions. Councillor Nolan, do you want to direct a question here?
Thank you, just again, pardon my misstep, but in the capital of the financial reporting that we had 1 or 2 points earlier, there was the indication of the ability for e-bikes and so on. This will all be cancelled as well, or are we able to move ahead with that particular part of the project?
The Mayor Keller, and for Councillor Malik. Councillor Malik, thanks for raising it and for coming back to it. And I can see where the confusion came, because certainly we had the capital plan in front of us. So I'm going to reference that, because that's actually where you found the information easily seen. So as a part of the Transit Capital Program and our grant, there's a e-bike sharing program that was in there. The total cost of that program is under $100,000. So it's obviously very minor in terms of the scale of the overall program. Administration isn't proposing to cancel that at this time. It wasn't a part of the RFP. We had a request for proposals for somebody to provide buses. It was exclusive to the provision of buses. We hadn't issued or taken any steps towards the e-bike program. Certainly given the impact on Parks Canada's outlying campsites, we would want to reevaluate that in discussion with Parks Canada about the routes that are available for e-biking to the town site, which again was the purpose. And in any case, administration hadn't expected to issue a RFP for simply issue an RFP for the procurement of the bikes. There may be other contracting options that would be available to us. So again, a very separate program, also funded by the grant. Administration hadn't taken any active steps to initiate that at this time, and it wasn't tied at all to the bus procurement that was underway. That is the subject of discussion today.
Thank you for that, and ties into a number of the capital programs that were discussed where we haven't expended the funds, and a lot of those will be reviewed next week when we have our budget, where the $54 million or so in capital, and we've expended some 16 million. You know, there's a large number of items that are gonna be brought up next week where they'll be either deferred, realigned, reassigned, when we look at the 2025 budget.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, Director Malinchuk might also have a view on this, but appreciate the heads up on the question. There certainly are, and every year there are a number of items that are carried forward from one capital site year to another. In some cases, that may be because the project took longer to mature, funds were unexpended by the end of the calendar year, need to be carried forward or for other reasons. Council will know that we have a process for that, and you'll see that in the budget. Sometimes the finalization of that list can actually happen a few months into the new year, once the final audit is done for the calendar year. I will suggest, though, that in the trial balance that was provided by Director Malinchuk, while there is $38 million in unexpended capital, $15 million of that comes from just 8 projects. So for example, the Bus RFP is one of those projects that was proceeding to be, underway in 2024. If we choose to put that into 2025, obviously those funds will not be expended. But there are other larger ones, in particular, the largest, and actually my math is bad because one of those projects is $16 million. Actually, I should need to do my math. It's a greater number, just 15 projects. For example, under housing, the GCHS community housing, there's a $16 million project. Obviously, council knows that we've awarded that project, but the vast majority of spending on that project will happen in 25 and 26. So that's an example of, although that $38 million of unexpended capital might look alarming, like we haven't been able to do what we had hoped to do. That is also reflective of projects that are initiated or underway, but where the capital just isn't fully, sort of written all the checks in. The activity center renovation is another good example. I can tell council that we're not going to have a lot of money left in that budget at the end of it. Do still forecast that we'll be on budget, even with the time disruptions. But you can see in the report that Director Malinchuk put forward for October 31st, we still have fairly significant amounts in the activity center budget, the arena budget, and the fitness and aquatic center budget. There's over $3 million, yearly $3 million sitting there that's unexpended. And that's simply a matter of the bills coming in sort of over the course of, weeks and months.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask the questions. And again, sorry I was a little late to the party here.
Good. Other questions? Councillor Demora.
I don't have other questions. I am not going to put forward a motion for this, but for the person that does, and I don't want to get into semantics, but just looking at the zero emissions transit fund, I would just kind of like our wording to go along more of the line. So if someone's going to go with the recommended motion, and then the latter part to reissue a new procurement process in mid-2025, I would like to put a comma behind that and say, for zero emission vehicles. Because that could mean a large van with some sort, it could mean something that is not just solely electric, and I don't know what that is. I know that we can't do hydrogen out here. I said that last week and I said it before, but I'd like to go along the lines of what is prescribed in the actual grant funding, and I think you don't know what kind of other opportunities are there, particularly if we have to grow into something. I know that other councillors have talked about our transit system having a blend of different fuel vehicles, and this could be one of them where maybe we can get partial funding for a vehicle that's half diesel, half electric, or, you know, something that's as close to zero emission as possible for our area, and, you know, we have to consider things, and I don't wanna get into the weeds, cause it's not my wheelhouse, but we do have to access places. If we work with, our other agencies that are a little bit more remote and, might require a little bit more distance to where actual vehicles can undertake. That does come out on fees, but I think just more aligning ourselves with the actual funding says in their wordage, so.
So I have a question for council, do we want to split the motion like we did last week, or it's just gonna be one motion?
Deputy Mayor Keller, although it's reflected as a single motion, I think that's probably taken from the recommendation last week, not from how it was actually made by council. It should be reflected as two motions here, because they were made independently, so they should each be dealt with independently.
Sounds good. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much. My question to administration around Councillor Demota's comments, is this grant specific to electric buses only? Can we get something different?
Mayor Keller, MP for Council Hall. The application was based around the concept of electric buses, and we may have some opportunity to investigate other potential vehicles. I don't see any particular harm in the changes proposed by Councillor Demota. We did apply for something specific, but if there are new technologies that meet the same intent or different ways of meeting the same intent, then that would be fine. One observation that I would make is that, you know, Jasper's transit system is built around these routes where we know we have the most high volume ridership. Our transit strategy and action plan identified that at some future point, we may wish to investigate on-demand transit, which is, you know, a thing in other communities. We didn't, you know, we're not at that stage of our development yet. So, you know, certainly during summer peak season, you know, a smaller van may not meet the need that we would have. But again, I don't see any harm in the adjustment that Councillor Dillon was proposing. As we go through the examination of whether joint procurement opportunities possible, there may be other technologies or other types that come to the fore that we might wish to put forward. And so, you know, the adjustment would mean that we're not limited.
Thank you for that. And I guess my only concern would be around the parameters of the grant. And as long as we are compliant, I'm okay with that. I just wouldn't want to be, you know, we're building a depot right now. And it's $3 million and it's mostly funded. I'd be nervous that if we were to change things too much, that would disqualify us from funding.
Deputy Mayor Keller, so certainly that's where the administration would want to ensure that we're doing our due diligence, that we issue a request for proposals for what we know we need, and then we check what we intend to put out for request for proposals with the federal funder. In the same way that we wanted to check with the federal funder before we brought forward a recommendation to council to cancel this procurement and reissue next year. We wanted to be certain that the federal funder would be supportive of that, you know, providing an extension. They are, so with that check, we're okay. And then as we go through the next number of months, heading towards, you know, issuing a new procurement opportunity, we would do that same process of checking.
Thank you for that. And I do support the idea of different kinds of buses moving forward as we expand our system. And I think the challenge that some municipalities and cities see with inserting EV buses into diesel routes is that they struggle, whereas the route in the system we're proposing is built around electric buses, where shorter routes, not full highway speed, blocks in the day where we can be charging. So I'm really confident around electric buses for this route, but I do ask for support as the system grows. We could potentially be looking at other kinds of buses.
Councillor.
Well, I make the first motion, if that council cancel the current procurement process for the electric vehicle buses.
Any debate? I'll call the question, all those in favor? That is carried. So Councillor Williams to make a second motion.
I'll make a motion. You do.
Yeah, I might be.
Go ahead.
Well, I think, but, yeah, I think we're all on the same track. I would make a motion that, administration, bring back to council, a newly worked, RFP, to be reissued, in spring 2025, for the procurement of electric buses and or any other zero emission options that prove to be available.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, and I'd like to speak in support of that motion, and when we talk about other options, we speak about buses, but we may be speaking about larger passenger vans for what I believe CEO Given referred to as perhaps there's a time when we have on-demand service as opposed to regular transit service. And then rewording the RFP for maybe a variety of vehicles to help support our transportation service is a very good idea. So I would support the motion as is proposed.
Councillor Nolan, Councillor DeMona.
Last week I said that I don't know anybody that supports this, and then I corrected myself saying that I know a few people. And I did get some correspondence from people in the community that are in support of it, and one of them said, you know, because I supported my reasoning behind my position. And they said, well, time will tell. The future will dictate whether you're a hero or a villain. So anyway, things to think about that. I found it kind of humorous, but you know, that's the type of sentiment that's out there.
Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. I too support this motion, and I think if there's ever a time to do this, it's on the heels of a natural disaster that took out 30% of our structures and displaced 40% of our residents. A fire that, in my opinion, was caused by climate change. At the time of the fire, there were drought indicators that had never been seen before. We were on day 11 or 12 or 13 of crossover, that's the wording for it, which is where temperature is more than humidity. The move to zero emission vehicles for transit makes sense. We need to think about how we move people around in the future, especially if we're going to see huge increases in visitation in the next few years, which I know the province is pushing for. So I support this motion.
Councillor Webster.
I do support the motion, and I was thinking about it quite a bit last week after the meeting, and did a little bit of research and thinking about a variety of elements of it. And it's one of the quotes that I came up with is one of the most important kind of leadership skills is if you make decisions that everybody would be happy with, then those decisions, we don't need us here to make those decisions. So I think it is our responsibility to make some hard decisions, and I agree with you that on the heels of this enormous disaster, it only makes sense to be really cognizant of our impact on the climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan.
I know I already spoke to this, but I am at this stage going to be voting in favor of this, regardless of where I feel we are with electric buses per se, but I like the exploration of looking for other options, and you know, we're still a few months out before we might see something in front of us. So Not to be a hero or villain in the future, but I'd rather be supportive of my fellow councillors that feel like this is a good idea and I don't want to be a stick in the mud. So it's all about working collaboratively.
Thank you, Councillor Demola. I can support this. I like the idea it's coming back. I like the fact that they want to look at other options, just not electric buses. So I can support this to move forward or to get it forward in spring to get more information brought back to council to make a decision. I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Update, 6.5 arena update, Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller. Between yesterday morning and this afternoon, we've received 16 letters from concerned families that have children in hockey. Our president of my sports and director of hockey have had concerns about the boards. I'm looking for an update around that. I know it might be hard to pin down a definite opening date, but there are legitimate concerns in the community that the boards aren't safe. I'd just like an update, please.
Mr. Gibbon?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller and Council Hall for bringing it to the table. Certainly happy to get the most current information out there for the public and for council. Administration sent out a note to arena users this morning and to provide an update. This is a follow-up to the email that was sent in Wednesday of last week, so less than 7 days ago. We sent an update and we're going to continue to send frequent updates, specifically to that targeted group of users who are most impacted. So contractors are scheduled to be coming to Jasper today to help with the startup of the ice plant for the arena side. So that will be this afternoon. The successful startup of the ice plant for the arena will enable us to start the slab cooling process. So I've learned a lot about arena operations over the last little while. So first we have to cool the concrete slab before we put water down. It's intended to freeze. That cooling process for the slab takes about 48 hours. Once the slab is cooled, the flooding, putting the water down on the slab, takes probably another 10 days approximately. And then after the ice is finished, we'll undertake additional work to ensure that the inside of the ice playing surface and the boards are completely safe before we allow anybody on the ice. So just council can have that confidence that no, we would not allow play on the arena if it were imminent. That's absolutely the administration's first priority, as it always is to ensure the safety of our residents. That's also important to me because I'm also one of those parents that has a child who plays hockey, and all of our home games are now pushed to the new year, is my understanding. So certainly I'm directly impacted as well as many of the Jasper residents. So as you can see, there's a process of ice making that does take some time. We want to ensure that we're leaving a little bit of elbow room towards the end of that to fix up any deficiencies on that ice surface side. And so this time we're saying that we expect that the arena will be ready for use the week of December 16th. While we're ice making, at the same time that we're ice making, we're going to continue the player box and board improvement project with work that needs to happen on the outside of the boards. So basically not on the ice surface. I appreciate that there, has been some perspective shared that the boards aren't safe, and they're not safe today because the project is not finished. So it's a bit like walking into the kitchen and saying, looking at the cutting board and looking at the, all the clippings and choppings and stuff, saying, well, this isn't an omelet. Well, no, it's not an omelet because it's still in process. And so anybody that may have been in to see the omelet being made would have that observation of, hey, this is not safe here. You're right, it's not. That's why we're not letting anybody on it. And we will ensure that it is safe before we allow it to be used for play. But in terms of communicating with ice users, we've committed that we'll send another update on Friday. So we expect, that 48 hours. So if we turn on the ice plant today, 48 hours, we should be in a position to start the flooding process on Friday. And we will send photographic evidence to council and the community in our Friday update. And I don't mean to make light of it, but we certainly appreciate that this is a high priority project for the community. We want to ensure that we're providing those residents that are most directly impacted with the most frequent information. So we're going to continue to do that.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that, and I think that the community will appreciate the update. Another question around the boards, and I think we all understand what happened there. We had contractors set to do in August. Unfortunately, we were evacuated and they were no longer available to come back and do it when we were open. Could we have not done the boards and just like what curious, what, just curious about that.
Well, so two different, I'll give the sort of the response to, could we have stopped the board project once the fire happened? And the answer was no, the boards were halfway taken apart and some of them were already improved and others weren't improved, and so you couldn't have the boards at two different heights. So once the project was underway, no, we couldn't stop it, it needs to be finished. Could we have chosen not to do the boards project in the first place, which is sort of another way of looking at that? And the answer is potentially. But the safety risk that we saw was that the flex of the boards, and this was brought to our attention by the users of the ice themselves, the way that the arena boards were flexing, you can imagine them sort of wobbling in and out. Wobbling is maybe a bit extreme, but when we have large players hitting the boards move as they're sort of supposed to do, that wobbling or movement would end up chipping up the ice surface that was immediately adjacent to the boards. So you would essentially get chunks of the ice breaking out around the base of the boards, and that ice, those ice chunks that were breaking out ended up being a risk and a hazard for ice users. It meant that there were divots along the edge of the board that could present a hazard for people playing on the ice surface. So it needed to be addressed. And it's another example of how we don't want our facility, especially when we have a known issue that causes a safety concern, we have an obligation and responsibility to address it. Could we have continued to let it ride for another season? Maybe, but administration, I think, was being quite wise and opportunistic, saying it's the summer. The arena's under renovations anyways, let's use this downtime to do this project that we know we need to do. And that's the action that we undertook. Obviously, the wildfire evacuation in the middle of it threw that off. This project likely wouldn't, the impact of this project wouldn't have been noticed by the community or the public had we not had the evacuation. It just would have happened during the time where there was no ice in the arena. And when we would have shown up in the fall to use the ice surface, knowing that the dressing rooms would still be under renovation and, and for a few more weeks. I think users wouldn't have even noticed that we had done anything. The challenge, of course, is, as you mentioned, Councillor Hall, we ran into the evacuation, the contract that intended to have 6 people available to work on this for a dedicated period of time no longer had that. And now we're having to work with contractors for him to supply the labor and the team that's needed as they can fit it in with their other broker work. And certainly appreciate the fact that they're continuing to do that. We expect to see them again here this weekend, and they will continue to work on, as I said, the stuff that's outside of the ice surface while the flooding is happening. That's the other thing the council should know is we're not waiting for one thing to finish before starting the next thing. We're looking for opportunities to tighten up that schedule by doing things that don't overlap, doing them at the same time. So we're doing things concurrently rather than sequentially.
You finished, Councillor Hall? Councillor Wilson.
So understand the delays and that the other contractor has other work, but and we were waiting on making ice until the boards were done. The boards are not yet done at a certain point, and I know this is the last case scenario that we want to deal with, but at a certain point, you have to get a different contractor. That contractor can't commit. So I guess I'm asking, have they committed to a date? I think that date is passed. Last time I got a walk through there, the boards seem to be a couple days out. That was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it sounds like there's commitment from them, but it's like when we can fit it in at a certain point, that doesn't work anymore.
Deputy Mayor Keller, Councilor Wilson, absolutely, that's 100% true. There are areas, and I've asked myself that same question, asked the team that same question. There are areas that are critical might be overstating it, but integral to the operation and function of the venue, the boards and the system, the engineered structures that are there. We want to ensure that we have one party responsible for all of those improvements that are made, so that we have one party that ultimately would, be responsible for warranty or any of those other things down the road. If we were to change contractors, I would and have investigated the opportunity to do that for things that aren't as integral to the functioning of the facility. So we're going with the integral stuff first, ensuring that we get a consistent installation of that from a single party that we can, they're hold responsible for the operation of it in the future. It's sort of the message received, and that is, we are at the last, so all of the improvements that needed to be made to allow the ice surface to work have been concluded. The improvements that are remaining are actually tidy up measures. If that's, it's not a technical term, but they are essentially tidy up adjustments that need to be made as a result of lifting all of the boards by 2 inches. You can imagine some of the doors don't quite fit right, and you need some additional space or those types of things. We also had some welding and sort of engineered work happening on the player boxes. So it's the reinstallation of the player benches in their new locations, and sort of the replacement of the puckboard in those areas that are off ice. The other adjustment that council and the community may notice is with the lifting of the boards and tightening of the boards. So we don't get that wobble that created the ice chipping. It means that some of the top cap around the glass in the corners needs to be adjusted. Again, this is work that doesn't need to wait for the ice to be made. Sorry, that ice making can happen, and we can complete that work after ice has been made. So again, we're trying to get the ice surface in as early as possible. We'll come back around to fix those things that we can fix ourselves with our own forces. If we need to get in additional or different contracted help for things that were not integral to the functioning of the boards in the arena, then we would do so. And at this stage, it doesn't, like, I think we've gotten through the vast majority of things, and we are content to let the current contractor finish up those last bits, because their work is no longer in the way of us putting in ice. Oh, that took a long way to get around to that last bit. That's the main part, is that the current contractor's work is no longer in the way of us making this.
No, you skirted their commitment. But they're here this weekend. And if it's tidy up work, I would suspect this weekend might be able to.
Yeah.
Do a second. The other suggestion, or question, I guess, is it smart to take on the adjustment of the benches at this point, or just button it, tie it up as best we can and do the benches at another point? Because I think the benches were still that swing of the gate we played with for years, or is that a new challenge there?
No, so the swing of the gate for any of the hockey folks that, understand the issue was a well-known issue from when we redid the boards. And frankly, I think a design issue that needed to be corrected. So we use this supposedly summer opportunity to get the contractor to do the same thing. So in essence, what we've done is expand the room in the player boxes by about 6 inches. We're moving the back wall of the player boxes 6 inches back. All the welding that needed to happen, the fabrication and installation that needed to happen to make that work has been done. So now we need to put in a larger panel of glass. We're gonna use plexiglass instead of the fancy arena glass to get going. The player benches themselves need to be re-secured to that back wall. And then we need to put on the puckboard. So this is all pretty minor work. All the real structural stuff has been done. Again, I classify it more as tidy up work than it is any of the structural stuff. The vast majority of that work's been done.
So, Mr. Gibbon, if I'm understanding this right, that once this work is done, those boards are safe to go, and we shouldn't have any issues for the spring, that once it's open, we won't be shutting down again. Am I correct?
Deputy Mayor Keller, yes, that's absolutely correct. Once we once we open this winter, we fully expect that they'll be able to have a full season of operating, or sort of that half season of operating without any interruptions. I think it is also important to acknowledge, you know, in front of council and the community, that we've also had staffing changes in that area. You know, all of us know how much love and attention can be put into that facility. That's a big loss for our organization and our community and our hockey community. And so, yeah, even if it hadn't been for the project, and even if it hadn't been for the wildfire and the evacuation, we would still this would be a year of adjustment for us as we go in with, you know, a new team who are building their experience in operating. So I certainly don't want to leave the impression that it's going to be perfect this year because of all those factors. But we are working as hard as possible and as quickly as possible to get our ice users back on the ice. And we would never put anybody on the ice if it could be made safe.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much for the update, and I can appreciate that this probably isn't a thing that's off the side of anyone's desk right now, and I would imagine that this is probably one of the main things you're focusing on and it's taking up a lot of time, and I do appreciate the work from the staff in the activity center, and thank you very much for the update.
Councillor Wise.
My question is to do with the swimming pool. It seemed to be absent from the update last week, and I wondered if the call for proposals for the repainting of the swimming pool liner was successful, and if we were able to move forward on that.
The Mayor Keller, for Councillor Waxman, yes, absolutely, we were. The Friday weekly update that was emailed out to council, missed that, but was adjusted on the website and on our social media to note that we were successful in getting a contractor to come in. They're currently in the process of sandblasting the pool basins, all of the pool basins. They're also replacing, and I think this is the question previously, they are also replacing the gaskets and seals between the pool basins. That work will all be completed in relatively short order, although it's slightly extended from what we expected. Part identifying the need to do this work. It does mean, though, that the pool will be able to remain open for at least 18 months before it needs its next regularly scheduled shutdowns. Council will know our regular practices that sort of after the busy summer season, we'll take about a month off to do a pool shutdown. That won't be required in the upcoming year because we're undertaking this work now. So this is a classic example of short-term pain for long-term gain. The pool will be completely refreshed when we reopen with new change rooms, improved lighting, and completely refreshed and updated pool business.
Mr. Chairman, do you predict we'll be open for Christmas?
Yes.
Any other questions? Can I have a councillor to receive the report for information? Thank you, Councillor Hall. All those in favor? Yes, carried. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. No, we have no notice of motion. Councillor reports.
I attended last week the Family and Community Support Services Association annual conference. And at that conference, I was elected as the representative for the Yellowhead region. So I will now be sitting on the association board for the upcoming year. And it is an important, it's a association akin to the municipalities, but with a specialty in the social field, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in that.
Thank you, Councillor Wester. Congratulations on your decision. Councillor Wilson.
Yesterday went to Hinton for the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority AGM. Prior to that, I stopped in at the landfill, and, you know, I had a trailer that had dumped, but I got directed up to the new cell that the authority had developed last year. Quite impressive, but yeah, we are now using the newest cell. And then at the meeting, there's much talk about accommodating the Jasper debris. The authority actually had ramped up kind of even late August and was ready to start receiving huge capacity of debris, which we actually didn't see at that point. And now they're starting to feel the actual increase in trucks coming in over the scale, and seems like we were prepped and ready a couple months early, which but I think they've kind of worked out a lot of the bugs. So the landfill is ready to take on any debris that comes their way.
Thank you, Councillor, so that sounds good. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. Last Thursday, I was honored, privileged to join Minister Rossino and Mayor Ireland in the Prairie Scan announcement of the $3 million for non-repayable, I won't say loans, I would say grants, but the non-repayable portion to Jasper small business. We have at this point, through Community Futures, received about 125 applications thus far, and showing that the program is being well embraced, and I hope will help many of our small businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. That was a great announcement. Councillor Howell and I also attended that. I attended the early childhood conversations last Wednesday on behalf of Councillor Waxer, and I have to say there's a lot of concern in town. A lot of families are leaving. Also, families are finding not a lot of programming, especially with the pool closed. Also, a lot of concerns about rent. Regarding temporary accommodations. There was an announcement that there was some rents that may be due, and they were waiting to hear what that amount was. It causing a lot of anxiety. A lot of young families are leaving. A lot of families that work in the tourism sector still not getting enough hours. So it indicates that moving forward that we could have a lot of problems next summer for hiring. So that was quite a conversation. They were saying that the food bank has roughly the same amount of numbers that we had last year, even though a lot of families are leaving. So it's an indicator that we have a huge economic downturn right now in our communities. I think in a long time, I was at an immigration meeting before I started this. I had to leave it, and there's more people looking for jobs than job listings. Well, it's gone the other way. It's that a lot of people are looking for their rural immigration status for permanent residency. It has been closed. There's 90 in the wait, but unfortunately, with all the immigration changes within Canada, that a lot of these people may not be successful. So a lot of people are closing out in Jasper, hoping to go through this program. But all employers had to guarantee 30 hours, and right now that is really hard for employers to do. So it's kind of a little bit of a merry-go-round that's happening right now. And other than that, that's my report. Anybody else? No? Okay, so upcoming events, we have. So, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to branch off on that, just because I've been working a little bit more one-on-one with people in the community. And I haven't been to community conversations. But one of the results, to branch off on what you were saying, of our higher levels of government changing the restrictions on the LMO status workers, they lifted the blanket for everybody, not just the people that were evacuated and that were having trouble back. And so some of the trickle effect of that happening is that people weren't obligated to stay for the companies that they were working for, or obligated to, and have thus left as well. So, you know, and you don't want to hold anybody's feet to the fire, but at the same time, were there businesses that were already struggling to have staff, and the ones that had accommodation for their staff, they still left. So there are deeper struggles going on in the community that we're not aware of at the same time. So I just thought I'd bring that to light, so in case other people didn't know.
So we have upcoming events, we budget presentations starting next Tuesday and Wednesday, November 26th and 27th. It's a 9 a.m. start for everyone. And community holiday party is December 13th at Jasper Activity Center, and tomorrow I believe there's NETMA at the Tara Friends Zone starting at 5 o'clock. Everybody that's until. And I believe the chamber Christmas party is December 6th also. Any other new business? If not, I will call for a motion to move in camera at 306, Councillor Hall, all those in favor? That is carried. I'd just like to thank everybody, and I'll just check with council, is there anything after in camera? So I'd like to thank everybody that attended the gallery today, and everybody that joined us by Zoom, and we will see you all next week at 9 a.m. for our budget meeting. Thank you.